Let's now look at why Israel stayed so long in Egypt and what they learned about God in the Exodus journey. They were supposed to stay in Egypt for 7 years, the time of the famine. And then, why stay on? But they stayed on for over 400 years. Now, humanly speaking, they stayed on because they were given prime land in Goshen. They were VIP guests at that time. They were family of the Prime Minister of Egypt, Joseph. Egypt, because of the massive Nile River, is a very fertile land. Goshen is right at the delta, very fertile. And so life was easy. They had all their physical needs met. Even when the dynasty changed, a new king came and did not favor them, forgot this new dynasty, didn't even know about Joseph. Yet they stayed on in spite of the persecution. Now today Jews are very much the same. There are all kinds of countries. They've settled into businesses that give them a comfortable lifestyle. And though they may be persecuted, and still they stay on. Very few have returned to Israel. So, humanly speaking, that was possibly the reason why they just stayed on. You see, the Promised Land had a little river called Jordan, which often dried up in the dry season. So there were famines when there was a dry season. But Egypt, the Nile, just keeps flowing and flowing. Now, but there are actually divine reasons why they stayed on so long. Number one, God had told Abraham that one day you will inherit the promised land. Now, Abraham is a little group. At this time, when they went to Egypt, there were just 70 of them. How could 70 people occupy the promised land, which was full of built-up cities, beautiful farms? It was filled with very high civilization at that time. 10 nations in the promised land at that time. So how could this handful of people occupy this land? So God told Abraham, you will stay 400 years. And so they grew and multiplied. Of course, the question is, how did 70 become 2 to 3 million? Now, 400 over years, in those days, people reproduced very young. They didn't wait till very late to get married. When they reached puberty, they got married. So let's say they got married 15, 16 at that age. 450 years gives you about 30 generations. 30 generations, if average had about 4 or 5 kids each, you will hit your 2 and 3 million if you do your math. All right? So numbers grew during this period of time. Plenty of food in Egypt to sustain them. But there was another reason why they had to wait 400 years before they could occupy the promised land. God had told Abraham that you will only own the promised land after the wickedness of the Amorites or the Canaanites were full. What does that mean? The people in Canaan had a very wicked culture. There were 2 things that stood out. One was immorality. Their whole religion was based on sex, the fertility religion. They worshiped God by having sex with temple prostitutes, both male and female. Oh, I mean, for us it's like Are you serious? No, that's serious, all right? So sexually transmitted diseases are very, very common. It's found in archaeological findings of bodies. Secondly, they worship their gods, their demon gods, so to speak, by offering human sacrifice, often their own children. Now, this wicked culture couldn't go on forever. And as it got worse and worse, it hit, so to speak, God's limit. And God said, in 400 years, their wickedness will be full, so horrendous that they have to be cleaned out from this earth. That's why we don't have a lot of sex religions today. We don't have a lot of religions that offer their babies to be burned, thankfully. So God removed this awful cancer in human society. So it's not ethnic cleansing, right? It was just morally immoral and wicked. So God said, you have to wait 400 years. Their wickedness will reach a point, I have to do something. So that was why they waited 400 years. Now, in the Exodus journey, what did the Israelites learn about God? Up to that point, when Exodus began, people had what they call their gods, national gods. The Moabites had their god, the Amalekites had their god, the Philistines had their god. Everybody had their own god. That's basically evil spirits. All right? Evil spirits are not omnipresent. They cannot be in the whole world at one time. They can be at a certain place, right? So every nation had their own gods, demon gods or evil spirit gods, right? So Israel learned first that their God was more powerful than all the gods of Egypt. Wow, the god of the river, the god of the sun, the Egyptian god of the land, their God was more powerful. That's the first thing they learned. Secondly, they learned that their God was actually the only God. The rest were not gods, right? So that was another truth. Their God was the God of the universe. Whoa, that's a new theology of that time, because everybody had national gods, right? Then they learned another truth during this journey, that this God of the universe had elected them, this little nation, to be a nation of priests, to bless, eventually, hopefully, the world. Wow, I hope you see the types, like we are priests of God to reach the world. Then they also realized that this God wanted to dwell with men. As he did in the Garden of Eden to walk, now he would want to have his presence with them. Restore his presence with them, a type of Christ living in us now. Okay, so the Jew began to learn these things, these important things about their God.